Stan Russo, Fantasy Football Evolution. Stan, good afternoon. How you doing today?
Good. How are you guys?
Very well, and very excited that we get the season opener tomorrow night. I've been waiting to do my Fantasy Football Evolution draft, and my favorite thing about this is that you can do the draft on your own time. You could sit down and knock it out in a few minutes. You could schedule it whenever you want. I could start making picks now, finish it up tonight after work, whatever I want to do. But just for the listeners who are not familiar with Fantasy Football Evolution, let us know just the basics, essentially, of how the competition works.
Well, essentially, we're the only true worldwide competition out there. We're determined to find out who the best fantasy football player is, player, owner, manager in the world. So what we've done is we've taken it out of 12-team or 14-team leagues where if you win, you're just the best of 12, and created a system that allows 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, even 1 million people to play and all play on the same level to see who really is the best. We have a unique 3-stage system which puts everybody on an even playing field, and then your skill and how you draft and how those players do determine whether you move on in the competition and whether you'll be the best in the world.
Yeah, I think that's the best thing about it is you take kind of this neutral approach where you're playing against the computer in the draft, but you're playing against other humans after that, which I think makes it a lot more interesting because it's not a case where you sign up for a league and the 11 guys you're playing against in this competition happen to be kind of weak, so that you have a really good team because of that, but then there's other guys out there who get hosed because there are more sharks in their league. This really sort of evens everything out in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Every single entry, and we say that people can buy as many entries as they like because every single team that you purchase is going to get its own separate league and go through the competition on its own merit. So everybody's on an even playing field, and, being the best out of 10, 11, 12, something like that, it's fun, and it's great to get together with your friends, but, fantasy football needs something more. It's time to really determine who the best in the world is, and this product does that for everybody.
And you do have smaller competitions. Anyone out there that wants to play against me can do that. I tweeted out the link at Derek VanRiper on Twitter, but what you can do is you can actually find out who the best player is in your state. Each state has its own competition. Lots of good stuff kind of mixed in there. Now, the thing I like about this format, Stan, is you've set it up where there's a lot more flexibility within the actual flex spots. You can use multiple quarterbacks in your lineup, and as we talked about last time you were on, the cost obviously is that you're going to miss out on running backs and receivers, but in terms of the more viable strategies, does it seem like the people who have done well historically have had at least 2 quarterbacks in their lineup most weeks?
Well, generally quarterbacks wind up scoring the most, and that's always the way it is, which is why most leagues don't allow a second quarterback to be a flex player. But we've decided, when we were creating this system, we decided the best thing for everybody out there was to allow them to utilize every single person on their team. So having a multi-quarterback starting strategy is definitely one that a lot of people are going to try, but we definitely tell people to try different strategies. If you want, first of all, you're not going to get Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, and Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. It's just not going to happen the way our draft works because everything is on an even playing field. So, you have to wind up getting one of those guys, then a Matt Ryan, and then maybe a Flacco. And there's no guarantee that they're going to have the monster years that you anticipate them having. And then you're using your 1, 2, and 3 pick on those players. Your running backs and your wide receivers are going to be much weaker. So, the trick is to get as many points in every single starting slot as possible. You pick your team based on, how you want to draft, and again, use multiple strategies during drafting, and then kind of, as you would in a regular league, guide your team how they're playing the best and try and just get as many points as possible. No strategy works, and every strategy works. Is a simple way to put it.
Yeah, a lot of different ways to kind of get to having a very strong roster. And, the one reason I've been waiting to do my draft is I always prefer to draft as late as I possibly can. But I'm curious to know also, with a player like Rob Gronkowski, where the news has gotten better, but it's still kind of vague because it's the Patriots and this is how they always operate.
Right.
How much does he move up? I mean, how much later or how much earlier do I have to take him now than I might have had to take him a week or two ago? Or is that something that really hasn't changed much just because the concrete information we have on him is still not really there?
Well, it's a good point. I mean, Gronkowski's value is definitely not set in stone. It's one of those characteristics that you really just don't know. And are you going to take a chance? Like last year, people were taking a chance on Adrian Peterson. He went a lot. He went late 1, early 2 in most drafts. You're just going to have to take that gamble. And the people who make those gambles and make those gambles work are generally the people who are strong, in their league and in this competition. I personally don't like drafting tight ends early. I would much rather get a Kyle Rudolph, a couple other players, Fred Davis, who I can get in the 7th or 8th round and power stock my running backs, even get a great quarterback early, versus spending a second or first or a second round pick on a Rob Gronkowski, who in a tight end position really doesn't get you that kind of value there. If he has a 20 touchdown year, you'll be kicking yourself, but again, that's the beauty of fantasy football. We just don't know.
Now, last time we spoke, we were looking at some guys that you kind of looked at as possible breakout players, but as we move into week 1, what are you most excited to see? Which players are you most curious to watch, or which situations are you most curious to watch unfold because of the uncertainty in various areas? I know the Denver running back situation is certainly one that a lot of people are keeping an eye on, but what's some of the most interest to you here in week 1?
Well, this in one of our previous interviews, Darrell Richardson. I watched him last year because I handcuffed him with Steven Jackson, and I watched him just do things that were electric. And I'm really interested to see how they utilize him. I honestly think that he could be one of those Marshall Faulk type players. I'm very interested to see him. I'm really interested to see how Larry Fitzgerald does this year with a guy like Carson Palmer, who hasn't had a great year since 2007, but is definitively an upgrade from anyone that Fitzgerald has had in the last couple of years since the Super Bowl. I think he's going to have a breakout year. Those are two players I'm really looking out for. And then always just trying to figure out what's going on with Detroit, because they have all the weapons in the world, and they're fantasy studs there, but you just never know what's going to happen.
You look at Reggie Bush. He's been able to stay healthy for the most part. Only missed one game in the last 2 seasons. Is he positioned in this offense to possibly have more value than ever, just given the fact that the Lions throw so many passes? And I think related to that, their defense, if it's a little bit better, may eliminate the necessity of throwing the ball 700-plus times this year. But to me, everything kind of lines up for Reggie Bush to maybe have a career year here in Detroit.
I agree with that completely. Reggie Bush is going to be that Roger Craig type player where he may not rush for 1,000 yards, but he may give you 650 yards on the ground and 1,000 yards receiving, and that's going to be, as your number 2 or 3 running back, that's just going to pile points on because you're going to wind up getting points on the ground and points from receiving. I think he can have a breakout year. Anytime you have a guy like that on a team with Megatron, who's always going to get double teamed, you have to think that he's going to break out. I think Detroit getting him was a huge stroke of genius, and if he can stay healthy, he's primed for a breakout year. The
backfield in general is pretty loaded. Mikel LeSure, a good complimentary back at least. Maybe not a guy that they wanted to have starting, but you add him. Joik Bell came on strong, very good PPR option last year, so could be a lot of production out of that Detroit backfield. When you look at some of the players that have been going off the board very early, typical first-round picks this year, Stan, is there anybody you've just been avoiding like the plague because you're concerned about the context around them or maybe even their individual skill set? I know a lot of people downgraded Arian Foster, for example. Is that guy Foster for you, or is it somebody else that you've just generally avoided so far in your drafts?
For me, Doug Martin. I always tend to stay away from second-year running backs. I think Doug Martin is a very talented player. I think that once you come out of college and then play that first year, there's just a lull in that second year. It's kind of a growing pain year, and him being in many drafts at number 2 or 3, I think that's way too high for him. I would easily skip him in that 2 or 3 spot. If he's available at 9 or 10, possibly. But I would much rather take Marshawn Lynch or LaShawn McCoy, even Ray Rice, over Martin. And I see Martin ahead of all those guys in every mock draft I've looked at.
Yeah, and I think the one thing about Martin that I've been trying to figure out, too, is, if you want to just take a chance on a backup in Tampa Bay in the event of a Martin injury, I've been kind of scrambling to figure out who it is. My lean right now is Peyton Hillis, only because he's had brief stretches in the past where he's been a productive fantasy option. He can catch some passes out of the backfield, and he's not a total breakaway guy, but at the same time, he could at least carry the load. Pretty unusual exit from Cleveland a couple seasons ago, and he obviously didn't really fit with the Chiefs either. But when you look down at further in the rankings, at your lottery tickets, your late round picks, are there a couple of guys you've been consistently throwing darts at because either they're a fantasy zombie, as they like to call them on the ESPN podcast, but is it somebody that you see? Are there anyone you see that could be that guy that just comes out of nowhere and actually has a fantastic year?
Well, a guy out of Indianapolis, T.Y. Hilton. I mean, he's starting to. It's tough to say him, but I will, because he's starting to climb up those rankings. But I think he's primed for breakout. For a breakout year. He kind of started last year and then kind of sputtered a little. I think that this could be that year for him. Ruben Randall. There's so many. One of the things you have to do is be good in the late rounds and catch that Steve Slayton or Chris Johnson of 4 or 5 years back, where you can get him in the 10th or 11th round and build your team around him with that extra spot. It's just so difficult because there are so many players out there. I think those two are guys that I would have on my radar. I
saw the Texans play the Packers the year of the Steve Slayton breakout. He looked so good in person, and I think that neck or a back injury that really gave him issues hanging onto the ball and whatnot, I think that really derailed him to a greater extent than people ever would have thought at the time. Now, Stan, as far as signing up for Fantasy Football Evolution, how should our listeners do that?
Well, you can go to fantasyfootballevolution.com. It's only $17 for your first entry. We're going to give you a promo code if you want to sign up using your challenge. The promo code is FFE835. It's going to give you $3 off your first entry, and that's DVR's Expert Challenge. So your first entry is going to only cost you $14. The next entries are discounted. This is the last couple of days, so you don't want to be trying to sign up on Friday because it's not going to happen. You have to sign up before 8 p.m. tomorrow night before the first game. You want to be in something that's better than your league. Leagues are great, but finding out if you're the best of 12 is starting to get old. And it's time that we had something that was more on a global level. And this product, Fantasy Football Evolution, is it. If you think you're good at fantasy football, you should come to this competition, to this website, sign up, and test your skills against the rest of the world. You'll find out how good you are, and we promise you will enjoy the process.
Yeah, I think it's cool, too. You guys have a consolation division there as well, so if you fall out of the kind of the running in the first few weeks, there's still something to play for down the stretch. Stan, good stuff as always. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Thanks a lot, Derek. Take care, guys.